There has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped at 10th and Ranch Michael Bider.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, 27-year veteran of the NYPD. Guys, I don't know if you saw last night's show, but it was probably two of the best tandem guests we've ever had on the show. And I've done over 1,100 shows going back 4 years now. And just the depth of knowledge, the experience, I felt the great camaraderie we had as just law enforcement brothers, and they just, sometimes people get taken aback by the way we kid each other, because that's not common in the private sector. So I said one time, oh, the FBI is doing a tap dance. Someone in the chat got like all upset about that. I was like, that's how we joke in law enforcement, because we work together. We protect each other's lives. We have each other's back, and there has to be some joking and, of course, some camaraderie in that. But I was just mesmerized by last night's show, and I was the host, but I found myself just listening and learning. Jim Clemente, retired FBI agent, he's got a law degree. I don't know where him and these guys get the time. They knock out a law degree like it's nothing. Him and Bobby Chacon, both lawyers. Of course, Mike Geary's got a law degree. These guys are spectacular. And not only, they're not just bookworms. They were street cops. Real, the FBI cops. They're street cops. And Jim Clemente worked undercover. He did so many different types of assignments. But in the interim, he also became an expert on profiling, an expert on serial killers. And of course, you guys all know that what's interesting to everyone here is that he was the main writer on Criminal Minds, the TV show Criminal Minds, the hit TV show, a show that really got it right. And they spoke a little bit about that, how, these young kids come out of the MFA programs, Master of Fine Arts. They're all fine writers, but they don't know what the hell they're talking about, because these guys are not just good writers, but they're writing from experience. And they even talked about how sometimes these kids will come out and they'll write things that what you just suggested is illegal. Law enforcement's not allowed to do that. What you just suggested is impossible. Law enforcement is not able to do that. So all of these things I found tremendously, tremendously interesting. And just the fact that Jim Clemente gave these examples of serial killers and the traits and what they do, and just incredibly amazing. And I want to play a little bit of what he said last night on our podcast. If I can get this thing going. Let's see here.
These were sophisticated crimes. It's not something that we would generally see in a 20-year-old. It's something that generally the offender takes quite a bit of time, and these are compulsive crimes. In other words, he's fantasizing about these crimes. And so he's thinking about these and planning on and on and on. And as he goes forward with his crimes, he gets more sophisticated. And this guy was able to actually do this repeatedly. At the time, they had found up to 10 or 11 bodies that could be attributed to him. And he used the same general area dumping grounds. So we said he was from the area, that this wasn't just a coincidence that he happened on this area. He knew he could go there. He knew he'd have privacy, and he knew that he wouldn't stand out there. So he lived, worked, or played there. But we said that because of the bindings, the particular bindings that he used, that he was probably a control freak, and that would come out in his home life and his job. And to find out that he was an architect, which is filled with specificity and precision, that is exactly the kind of job that I would expect this guy to have. When I said he was married, I said that because generally somebody who he's in his 30s or 40s, a lot of times these offenders will have a family that they either control completely or that they use as a front for legitimacy. But the thing that really got me here was the fact that his crime seemed to have a seasonal nature. And what I opined at the time was that he was only offending at times when his wife and kids or his parents were away for the summer. And that's exactly what happened. His wife and kids would go out to Maryland and go out to where was it? Iceland, I think she was originally from. And so, I don't know if it was a marriage where he sort of got a mail order bride. I'm not sure, but that wouldn't surprise me because I really think his family was a front for him. If you look at the way he kept his house, how much money he put into his guns, but how little he put into his house. The facade of his house was falling apart. His wife was using food stamps. I think his family, that's just an indication of how he actually looked at his family, what he actually felt about his family. And so the marriage and the fact that he only killed when they were on vacation was easy to predict from his behavior. I said that he was a sexual sadist, and that came from the fact that he used one of the victim's phones to call that victim's sister and taunt her and tell her what he did. And that is a sadistic act that helps him relive that fantasy. In other words, he wants to have as much of a ripple effect from these horrific acts that he committed as he possibly can. He wants to.
So that is from last night. Jim Clemente, a retired FBI agent, just a tremendous take on this. And, not just, we hear a lot of people just guessing. And so I think because of this guy really has it right. I mean, he predicted in the New York Times in 2011, this is what he said about Rex Human. And he reiterated some of it last night when he was talking right there, was that he's most likely a white male in his mid-20s to mid-40s. He's married or has a girlfriend. He's well-educated and well-spoken. He's financially secure, has a job, and owns an expensive car or truck. Rex Schumann, of course, was 47 at the time. He was and is married. He has an architecture degree and ran a consulting firm that specialized in dealing with New York City's building codes and the officials of the Department of Buildings who approve applications from building owners, judging from this 2022 interview. And that's the one where he spoke with that gentleman and introduced himself. I'm Rex Humerman, in some ways even charming. I didn't find, when I watched the interview with Rex Humerman with that, I didn't find him at all charming. Some people found him charming. I found him, I sort of, without, of course, we all give it up. We know he's a serial killer now, but when I first saw it, I was thinking, no, he's sort of a nerd. I didn't get any charm out of it. I got that he was a nerd. And
okay. Rex Huerman, I'm an architect. I'm an architectural consultant. I'm a troubleshooter. Born and raised on Long Island.
Okay.
Been working in Manhattan since 1987. Patience.
That's funny. I was hoping you would say that.
Yeah. Patience, and I don't like to use the word tolerance, but sometimes you have to.
Yeah.
And it's not just with the city, it's also with the client.
So in that interview, I mean, I didn't find any charm there. Some people may have found him charming. I didn't see that in that interview, and maybe others did, but I didn't find him charming. And one of the things that Jim Clemente, we spoke about last night, and he was so interesting and so knowledgeable. Decades ago, experts in criminology talked about serial killers being organized and disorganized. And some examples of that, I'll put on the screen, of course, Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, who, was married, had kids, worked a job, and meanwhile was a serial killer. John Wayne Gacy, mostly specialized in killing children. He was a pedophile. He owned his own construction company and used to pose as a clown or go to kids' parties and work as a clown. And of course, Bundy. It's what a stare that is, that 1,000-yard stare. So disorganized, and the Long Island serial killer was highly organized. In his professional life, Uerman appeared to be that. He marketed himself as an expert in the details of New York's Byzantine building rules, saying he had bought copies of long out-of-date codes to have on hand when dealing with old buildings. Former clients described him as painstaking and methodical. How did that work in his other life? And people have said, oh, he's got this dual life as a father, a suburbanite, a man who takes the Long Island Railroad to work every day, the owner of an architectural firm. But at the same time, there were discrepancies in this, because usually signs of being disorganized is the condition of his house. His house was disgusting, right? I mean, the police used the word cluttered. I bet they would really like to say it was a shithole, not cluttered. And I've been in houses like that. I've walked through houses, and usually hoarders live like that, and I don't doubt that Rex Uerman was a hoarder, and then we come into all these other things. Like, well, then how was his family? How did his family not know about this? Did his family have some kind of inkling and put up with it? How did he treat his family? And I ran that by Jim Clemente last night, and he felt that abusive also. Maybe not physically abusive, but how about abusive in the way he spent his money? His wife was using food stamps, but yet he had over $100,000 worth of firearms in his basement and spent, who knows, thousands of dollars on hookers, which of course most of us believe she didn't know about that. I don't know. I'm not convinced of that. I'm not convinced of how much she knew, how much she didn't know. But what I am convinced of is that she was not treated well by this man, nor were his adult children that lived in the same house. He was a creepy individual, I believe, So there's so many aspects to this case, and of the complex and unexplained aspects of this investigation. And specifically, of course, everyone mentions the name Shannan Gilbert. And how was she killed? Was that part of the Gilgo Beach case? It certainly was the catalyst that led them to the bodies of the rest of the victims. But was she one of the victims? Or did she die, as the police seem to believe, in a horrible accident? Those are some of the things that are baffling, and those are some of the things that make the true crime community basically get a little crazy. Because add to that corruption. James Burke, right? Add to that James Burke and this police chief in Suffolk County that ran this case. There he is in that picture. That ran this case from 2012 to 2015. What was that all about? Was this the reason why certain investigative leads were somewhat ignored? Because James Burke was running this case? How about the gentleman on the upper right, John Ray, the attorney for Shannan Gilbert? Did he keep this case alive? Did he sort of make this investigation not go away the way a lot of people wanted it to? I'm going to play a little bit of the Shannan Gilbert.
State police. Yeah, there's somebody after me. I'm sorry? There's somebody after me. Where are you? There's somebody after me.
What's the matter? Are you okay?
What are you going to do? What are you going to do to me? Please, stop.
Me, Mike. Brother,
No, stop it, please.
That is the voice of Shannan Gilbert calling 911 on May 1st of 2010. She was calling from the gated community of Oak Beach on Long Island in New York. Shannan was a prostitute who visited a client in that neighborhood. That call for help did not save her. Shannan disappeared. The initial search of the area Shannan was calling from did not reveal what happened to Shannan or where she was. But it did uncover something even more shocking: a series of bodies and a potential serial killer. And as more bodies were discovered, the search intensified, and finally, 18 months later, Shannan's body was found. Tonight, we take a listen to the 911 call made by Shannan, which took 12 years to release, and we try to uncover what happened to Shannan, how she died, and why this case has still not been solved. I'm Vinny Politan. Thank you so much for that call right now. Let's take a listen.
State Police, 555. State Police. Yeah, there's somebody after me. I'm sorry? There's somebody after me. Where are you? There's somebody after me. Okay, where are you? There's somebody after me. Where are you, ma'am? I don't know. Are you driving right now? No, I'm inside the house. I'm sorry? I'm inside the house. What house? I don't know. Can you trace where I am? I'm sorry? Can you trace where I am? No, I can't. What's your callback number you're calling from? Huh? What phone number are you calling from? Somebody's after me. Please. Are you in Suffolk County or Nassau County? I'm in Long Island. Where on Long Island are you?
You know, we've discussed before that we feel Phil Grimaldi raised the issue the other night, is that this 911 operator wasn't very good. You know, two of the most important things is to get the name of the caller, the number of the caller, and of course, the location where the person is calling from. And it doesn't, to me, it doesn't seem like the 911 operator was aggressive enough in trying to get that information. There's other people, she can hear other people on the scene. Ask them what the address is, you know. But she was never able to get the address. She was never able to get the phone number, and she was never able to get the name of the caller. So that in itself also, I mean, we can't blame this thing on the 911 operator, of course, but that is all part of this.
No. 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 No, stop, no. Where in Long Island are you? In Suffolk County? Nassau County? Huh? Why? Why didn't you call me by my name? Why? County, you on the line? Stop. Please. Stop it, please. Please stop. Please, can you shut the door? No, time to go. Please.
See, that's one of the things that she says, can you close the door? So in essence, she wanted him to close the door inside her house. That's a little baffling to me. And, you know, guys, what we have to remember here, too, is that being a call girl, it's a dangerous job. It's a dangerous profession. And many times, of course, in these calls, they're going to, of course, people they don't know, locations they're unfamiliar with, and there's alcohol and drugs involved. And that surely was part of this whole situation. And look, I'm open to believing that this could have been a murder. However, to me, the facts and circumstances of coming to that conclusion do not add up, and for many, many reasons. Michael Pack, he's her limousine driver. He drove her there from Manhattan. At some point, she gets away from him. He's saying, get in the car. I'm going to take you back to Manhattan. And she refuses. Why? Why did she refuse to get back in the car with him and to go back into Manhattan where he picked her up? Michael Pack, of course, and all of these people, Joseph Brewer, and I know there's more characters involved in this investigation down the road. However, I think it's clear through this investigation that this one is not connected to Rex Heuermann, and I don't believe it's connected at all to Chief Burke, Chief James Burke, because had either one of those individuals been there, there would have been witnesses that would have said so. Oh, so-and-so was here, and she walked off with him. Because there was a lot of witnesses. There were some witnesses there, of course, that had no axe to grind, that had nothing to do. Gus Coletti had nothing to do with this other than she walked up to his house. He called 911 for her. He invited her in the house. She walked away. And then she went up to the house of a Miss Brennan. Same thing. No axe to grind. And she walked away from there. And the conclusion that the Suffolk County medical examiner came to was they couldn't conclude cause of death or manner of death. Manner of death would be homicide, suicide, accidental, or natural, which obviously is not natural. So, and they were more or less erring on the side that this was an accidental death. And many people find that not believable, that listen to this 911 call, this is suspicious. And then, of course, the attorney for the family, Johnny Ray, hires Michael Baden, former New York City office of the chief medical examiner, and he basically comes to the same conclusion. However, he says, but the hyoid bone, which is in the lower part of the neck, was broken. Therefore, I'm ruling it death by strangulation or death by asphyxia. And even though I can't conclude it was a homicide, it's a homicidal death. So he sort of contradicted his findings, but still found it to be ruled that it was a homicide.
Please.
Go that way, please. Come on, let's go. Come on, roll that side. Come on, roll that side. Come on, all of us. Come on, roll that side. Come on.
No, please.
Come on. Please, come on.
Please.
Come on.
Why?
Just come on. I'm going to say it. You leave. I'm going to say it. Okay? Please.
That's Joseph Brewer saying, I'm going to go upstairs. I'm going to leave the scene. He obviously wants to leave and he wants to go about his life. However, he's involved in this and he's the one, he's the John, to put it in street lingo.
Yeah. My clothes. All right. What's the matter? Are you okay?
What are you going to do? What are you going to do to me? Why? Huh? Well, I don't know. It was transferred to me. Why? You going to kill me? You going to kill me? Why are you going to... Oh, stop it, Melanie.
Come on.
I'm in the middle of nowhere.
Let's go back to Manhattan. Right? We're in Long Island. We're up near the water.
Please, stop.
Please, Mike. Brother, come on.
No, stop it, please.
So that there's her driver. Some might say, I think Johnny Ray said pimp/driver, So yeah, there's a lot of unanswered questions to that. And this is exacerbated by the fact that many people are pointing the fingers at Suffolk County police corruption in the way of James Burke, who was running this investigation and who had sort of an extremely nefarious background. So when we look at all of these things, are there questions? Absolutely. There are so many questions to this case. And if there's anything that positive came out of this negative thing, of course, the death of Shannan Gilbert, was the fact that this was the catalyst that led the police to find the Gilgo Four, the 4 women that were recovered near Gilgo. And folks, I don't know if you've ever been to the Gilgo Beach Ocean Parkway area, especially Oak Beach and Gilgo are about 5 to 6 miles away from each other. So how it was also initially connected, Oak Beach, Shannan Gilbert found in Oak Beach, but the bodies from Gilgo were found in that December 2011. And perhaps this case led the police to really push the investigation so that they would be able to find these victims who were missing. Maureen Brainard-Barnes, Melissa Bartolome, Amberlynn Costello, and Megan Waterman. And I know that everyone, including myself, we all have a problem with this investigation when we find out that someone fitting the description of Rex Heuermann visited the home of Amberlynn Costello, and not just visited the home, but pulled up in a green Chevy Avalanche. And then the first night, of course, we understand that there was a ruse perpetrated by Amber Costello's roommate, pimp, whatever you want to say, who pretended that he was her boyfriend. And when Rex Heuermann had paid his money, he more or less scared him away and he fled and left his money there. However, he called the next night and arranged a date with Amber Costello. And same thing, but didn't go into the house this time. However, pulled up in that green Avalanche, and Schaller, the roommate, the pimp, gave this information to the Suffolk County detectives, the Suffolk County police. And that is the big question that most of us have. Then how did this information remain dormant, remain unfollowed up upon? How did they not look into this information? And the other night we had retired NYPD Chief of Detectives on, Robert Boyce, and he had some big questions about that too. How were they unable to find this vehicle? And the fact that it had been in areas near Massapequa Park, near Amberlynn Costello's home, and connect the dots to the burner phones that were pinging in Massapequa Park, in Manhattan. Of course, we all know now, near Rex Heuermann's office. So how did all of that information, how was that information unable to be followed up on? Or why? Well, that's one of the things we want to know. And I think it'll become a bigger issue when if and when we find out that during those years, Rex Heuermann had killed other victims. Then I think it'll become
men who came to be known as the
much bigger
Gilgo
issue.
Four were discovered here in the brush off Ocean Parkway in December 2010. Now police say they finally found the murderer.
He was living a double life. He had a wife, he had 2 kids, nice job as an architect.
And Rex Heuermann, 59, probably never expected to be surrounded by cops in Midtown as he left work on a Thursday evening.
Rex, did you do it?
Still wearing the same khakis, the towering suspect was accused of being the Gilgo Beach, Long Island serial killer known as LISK, who eluded law enforcement for more than a dozen years.
But you were aware that he was patronizing other sex workers?
It certainly appeared as though he was, yes.
While investigators in white Tyvek suits immediately descended on Heuermann's lifelong home in Massapequa Park, armed with search warrants, the suspect was initially charged with murdering 3 of the Gilgo Four, Megan Waterman, Melissa Barthelemy, and Amber Costello, all petite online escorts who were discovered dead in 2010 with another escort, Maureen Brainard-Barnes, in the brush off Ocean Parkway.
The only thing I can tell you that he did say as he was in tears was, "I didn't do this."
3 of the sex workers were bound in burlap, and Hewerman was named the prime suspect in the murder of the 4th, Brainard-Barnes. Forensic psychiatrist Dr. Park Deese consulted on the case of serial killer Joel Rifkin, another Long Island resident, and spoke to us about Hewerman's arrest.
The most common sexual motive for serial killings is sexual sadism. Becoming the god to that victim is the offender's primal goal.
The architect's neighbors on First Avenue in Massapequa Park were stunned that the hulking Hewerman hid the alleged crimes for so long. A map showing Wantagh Parkway near his home reveals how easily he could have driven to Ocean Parkway, close to the Jones Beach Exchange.
He grew up there as a kid with his parents.
Many thought that Hewerman's house was an eyesore. Detectives said they found hundreds of guns locked in a vault in the house, and fairly soon they were searching storage facilities nearby.
Are there body parts or things that we need to take a look at? Are there trophies of some of the victims that, unfortunately, that he stored in that location?
The crucial break in the case had come last year from a new interview with Amber Costello's roommate and pimp, who said that John had come to their house in Babylon on September 1st, 2010, the day before she vanished, and the client, described as ogre-like, was driving a green Chevy Avalanche.
6 weeks later, on March 14th, 2022, the name Rex Hewerman was first mentioned as a suspect in the Gilgo case.
Now,
that is the amazing piece of evidence that is going to haunt this case all the way through its completion. Now, luckily, we all know that Rex Hewerman is not going anywhere. He's, well, let's say he's innocent until proven guilty, but they have 3 pretty damn solid cases against him and potentially a 4th. And now this is all digging up. They have to keep digging and digging and digging and finding potentially other cases that he may have been involved in. And that is an exhaustive investigation, utilizing much manpower, much science, much art of investigation. And that is what we were all concerned with, because if we find out, or I almost think of saying when we find out, that Rex Hewerman had committed murders between 2010 and 2011, when they discovered the bodies, and they had this information. They had the green avalanche. They had the description of him. They had information on these burner phones, and that no investigative leeway potentially was made during all that time. It was, look, the arrest wasn't made until 2023. So could there potentially be other victims? Yeah, 100%. So what does that say for the investigators on this, when this investigative nugget, this unbelievable investigative lead, wasn't pursued, or perhaps was pursued incorrectly? I think Chief Boyce said the other night that he had heard, or he had information that when they first ran this vehicle through a lawman search, which is a computer database, they ran it as a truck, I think, instead of a car, or I could have it reversed, or as a car instead of a truck. So if it vice versa was listed as a truck in DMV and not a car, it wouldn't have came up correctly, and vice versa if you ran it as a car and it was in fact listed as a truck. However, when they put this task force together, 6 weeks later, they had identified Rex Hewerman on a lead, on information, on a witness that they had 12 years ago. So this nugget of investigative information was in this case and not followed up on correctly. That is what, when we talk about the complexity and the unexplained aspects of this case, that's a big one. That absolutely is a big aspect of this case and hard to explain why.
Not only did he own the Chevy Avalanche, but he matched the physical description.
During a Google search of old maps, investigators discovered a green Chevy Avalanche parked outside Uerman's house in plain sight. And now a former escort is coming forward to say she talked about true crime investigations with Rex Uerman during a date. Long Island stylist Nicole Brass appeared on Cuomo.
And I said, well, have you heard of the Gilgo Beach murders? Like his body language kind of changed and like his eyes were like as if he was in a different place, like he was picturing it all over again. Like, it was weird. He almost kind of made the victims like seem like people who didn't matter.
Uerman's wife has now filed divorce papers, which were not contested. The wife's sister, Johanna, spoke briefly to Pix 11 News from her Long Island home.
We don't know anything. We're hearing about most of it on the news ourselves. So we're just going to refrain from saying anything.
And there are more revelations about the people Rex Uerman did work for. Aside from contracts with New York City and Target, documents reveal he received $200,000 from former President Donald Trump's company to renovate office space at a downtown building. The revelations just reinforce investigators' beliefs that the serial killer suspect lived two lives. Dr. Dietz said he would like to know if the burly Uerman was bullied in his childhood. Law enforcement wants to know if the suspect is connected to 6 other Ocean Parkway victims, some of them dismembered.
It could be that they are all linked or that some are linked. It would be quite a coincidence to have another serial killer working in the same area at the same time, but it's happened before.
Families of the victims who lived in upstate cities or out of state had to fight to get the attention of law enforcement because the women were categorized as sex workers. Relatives of the victims often held vigils here and demanded they get treated with dignity. Now they've seen the face of the accused killer.
He just looks like a cold monster. And in his eyes, I mean, you can just see that it's like a sociopath.
Victim Amber Costello's aunt watched the serial killer case unfold from her home in North Carolina. Other families somberly followed District Attorney Ray Tierney into court when the gruesome indictment was unsealed. One of them was the younger sister of victim Alyssa Barthelemy. The sister was just 15, according to family, when the accused killer made taunting phone calls in 2009 using Barthelemy's cell phone.
That's one of the things that we spoke about to Jim Clemente, about the taunting phone calls. And that is part of being a sadistic sexual predator. And it's suggested, or it is known, that these people get their jollies out of it, I guess is a good word. That's how they get their sort of sexual satisfaction over the pain of others, which is really sort of a scary thing to think of. Some of the other aspects of this case also are, I would like to know, and I think a lot of people would like to know, how many escorts did he go out with and have a date and not kill the person? There had to be many. I don't think he would. Or did they read into him, and did they back away from him and not complete the date? Those are some of the things, some of the questions I think that we need to have answered for us through the investigation and the investigators. We play a little bit of this here.
Former escort Nikki Brass, who says Uerman solicited her approximately 8 years ago.
I had a really, really bad feeling. Like my gut was like telling me I needed to get away from him.
Especially when he actually mentioned the Gilgo case, she says.
When he talked about it, he would like speak in a they and hypothetical. But he had this like smile on his face that made me really uneasy.
She ended the date early. Meanwhile, the investigation now broadened to include Heuermann's property, both in South Carolina and Las Vegas, Nevada, and 2 of his Chevy Avalanches with potential forensic evidence.
Anything from hair to a trophy, souvenir, jewelry, anything that can help us connect these victims to that vehicle will be instrumental in strengthening the case.
As these neighbors can't help but recall memories of Heuermann from the past that seem all the more disturbing now, like when he'd gaze over this fence or when he brought home a giant metal door, which he told his neighbor he needed to seal off a vault in his basement.
But he told me back then, this is to protect my guns. Who gets a door like that, a monstrous door like that to protect guns? So
you're wondering what might have been, what else might have been behind?
God only knows.
Yeah, and there's plenty we still don't know, but today Eyewitness News learned from the Suffolk County Sheriff that at least 2 sex workers currently in the Suffolk County jail system right now had prior contact with Rex Heuermann through various social media platforms, and they have audio recordings of him. Heuermann currently in a special unit in a solo cell.
So there are so many more aspects to this case that must be looked into, and aspects that, you bring in the scientists, bring in the profilers. For example, as Jim Clemente last night, I heard things from him that I had no idea about in my, 16 years in the NYPD Detective Bureau, my 27 years on the NYPD. I knew nothing of that, because it was not just police work, but it was merging police work with the science. I talk all the time, investigation is an art and a science, and surely Jim Clemente is one of the best. Just to give him a little plug, he wrote the scripts to Criminal Minds, and not an easy thing. And of course, Bobby Chacon. I thank these guys. They were 2 of my most brilliant guests last night. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot from it. I think the audience learned a lot from listening to these 2 guys as to what is on the minds of these people. Why are they doing what they are doing? Why, of course, are they committing murders? And that's not anything that any of us know the answer to. However, when we think the length of time that Rex Heuermann was out there free, living the life, a double life, if you will, the life of a father, a husband, the owner of an architectural firm, and a serial killer. How is that possible in this day and age? Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. If you like real crime, true crime, from a police perspective, then you're in the right place. And if you're not subscribed to us, go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and ring that bell. And if you want to contribute to us, we have a Patreon with 3 different levels. And we also have a YouTube channel membership with, count them, 5 different levels. And you can contribute to that. You see the folks in the green font. They're part of our YouTube channel members, and we really appreciate all our subscribers, our friends, our fans, whatever you want to call them. But look, this case is not even remotely close to being over. I mean, there's so many aspects of it. I think there's a lot that sort of make people upset, sort of make people think this was the worst of policing and it was the best of policing. And how could it be that at the same time? How could it be the best and the worst? Well, for years, 12 years, there was no arrest made in this case, although evidence was pointing to the perpetrator. And then competency in the way of Police Commissioner Rodney Harrison, in the way of the new District Attorney Ray Tierney, in the way of the task force that Rodney Harrison established when he went out to Suffolk County, resulted in the identification of the perp in 6 weeks. 6 weeks instead of 12 years. And now, of course, they didn't make the arrest for over a year because you can't just arrest someone because you think he's the guy. You have to have something called evidence and probable cause. M. Faithful, I don't think Burke was involved in any murders, but his own shady doings made him want to gloss over all of this and stop his own wrongdoings being discovered. M. Faithful, I don't doubt that that's true, but he also, through his position, sort of prevented the investigation from moving forward and prevented from the investigation to make advances that they could have easily made had there been the FBI involved. And again, Rodney Harrison came in and started the Gilgo Beach Task Force, Suffolk County detectives, Suffolk County District Attorney's Office, New York State Police, FBI, Suffolk County Sheriff's Office. Boom, 5 entities. If you can get those resources, then you do it. But what bigger case could there be than a serial killer? Let's get the resources. Let's spend the money. How difficult do you think it was for the people that lived in Suffolk and Nassau County to realize that there's a serial killer loose on Ocean Parkway, Gilgo Beach, in that area, Massapequa Park, where they didn't know that till the arrest was made? How difficult. I'm going to play a little bit of this of Johnny.
Was surprised as to the person it was. No surprise of the arrest. We had a tip that it was coming within a few days. And a little bittersweet taste of victory because we've pursued this case, I have, and my staff, for 12 years. When the task force was finally formed only a year ago, headed by the District Attorney Ray Tierney and the Police Commissioner Rodney Harrison working with him. Only then did anything happen of significance to move along this case. And you can see that within weeks of forming this task force, after so much delay and lethargy on the part of the police, the case was already moving towards solution. And so the reason I say bittersweet is this. On the one hand, it's wonderful they took this monster off the street. It's wonderful that it's connected to the victims, 4 of them so far, and maybe more. And it's likely that other people he may have killed will turn up. All that's just, you can't ask for more from our law enforcement. But the flip side, the bottom side of that coin is this: where have they been for 12 years? This goes to show that they had the same tools, they had the same equipment, they had the same facts. They knew about the car a long time ago. What caused
Suffolk County PD was in turmoil for over a decade. James Burke cast a cloud over the Gilgo murders. Rodney Harrison and the new task force changed everything. That's retired NYPD Lieutenant Peter Pranzo of Harlem Raiders fame. Thank you so much. I really take what you say with the utmost respect, and I know that you know what you're talking about.
Caused them not to do the job that they've now done. They were the police department I'm speaking of, not the task force. The task force with the police department together have done a wonderful job. But before that, we need to know, and the public does need to know, where have they been?
Ray, do you
Where
think a
has
lot
this
of that has to do with, you've suggested that it may have been associated with what police may have suspected the women may have been involved in? Do you think that played a part in their slow step to act?
Initially, it played a part before it was known that all these girls were dead. It played a part in the search for Shannan.
You know, folks, anyone who's in the police service, anyone who's ever been a cop before, and this is disturbing because we like to think that we provide our services, provide justice to people not based on who they are or what they are, or their race or their nationality or their sex, or whether they're straight or gay or whatever they are. We pride ourselves in providing police services and investigation, and to work as hard on the murder of potential escorts, call girls, than we would for just a regular person. And when this is implied, anyone that's a serious cop, this bothers them, that if that's the case, that's not a good thing. That's really a bad thing.
In Gilbert. That changed significantly, however, when the chief of police in Suffolk County, a man named Burke, who eventually went to jail and it was a solicitor of prostitutes, when he took over the police department in Suffolk County, he immediately shut down the investigation and blocked all the other agencies from coming in. That changed the whole tenor of the investigation. Not that these girls were sex workers, but that Burke involved himself with sex workers and closed down the investigation. And that seems to have been the dominant force and mentality in the police department for years. And finally, we have a fellow like Tierney and a man like Harrison come in and basically clean up the act and get it moving right.
John Ray, thank you so much.
You know, folks, that's we addressed that the other night when I had Chief Boyce on, who also, if you didn't watch the show the other night, retired NYPD Chief of Detectives Robert Boyce. We had talked about that too, and that to anyone that really prides himself in being an impartial and fair and real cop, that's very bothersome. That could have been. And is that a cultural thing? Like, is it brought up that, they didn't work as hard because these were call girls. They're not as important as other people. They're not really, they're out there selling their bodies, and therefore they're not going to work as hard. I think that's, again, to anyone that prides himself in being the real police, the real popo, as we call it, above 125th Street, it's disturbing. It's disturbing. And we would think or believe, hopefully, that they would want to work for the victims identified, the Gilgo 4, Maureen Brainard-Barnes, Melissa Bartolome, Amberlynn Costello, Megan Waterman, and now also 7 more bodies that we know of. So pride in what you do, pride in being a professional, and Rodney Harrison brings that with him to this. He brings with him 30 years of NYPD experience, culminating with him being the chief of department, the highest ranking uniform position on the NYPD. And he brings that knowledge, the experience, and he brings a coolness, a really low-key coolness that I really admire, And he also brings with him years of being a street cop. And that's an important thing too, because to know the street and to work the street, all of those things are just so important. And it's just, when we say if it really was the culture that prevented this arrest for all those years, then that's really, really extremely disturbing. Folks, if you're looking for a good attorney in the New York City metropolitan area, then Joe Murray is your man. Joe Murray is a retired NYPD police officer and a fantastic defense attorney. You can reach Joe on his cell phone at 718-514-3855, or email him at joe@jmurray-law.com, or go on his website, jmurray-law.com. Joe is also a huge supporter of the Police Off the Cuff podcast, and we really appreciate everything he's done for this show. So, folks, the whole theme of this is peculiarities to this case. So I'm going to play a little bit more of Johnny Ray
Talk
here.
a little bit more about it, and I have a very special guest. Joining me right now is John Ray, the attorney representing the families of 2 of the alleged serial killer's victims, Shannan Gilbert and Jessica Taylor. Great to see you, John. Thanks so much for taking the time. What a monumental day. Tell us what the families are feeling right now after this.
Well,
I just wanted to say this attorney comes across. I mean, I said a couple of weeks ago, he reminds me of like a Dr. Seuss character in the way he dresses and everything. But let's face it, he may be flamboyant. Someone had also said that that he never met a camera he didn't like. However, he did serve a purpose. He kept this case in the forefront. He kept this case on the front page. He kept this case in the news. He kept law enforcement on their toes because he represented two of the victims. Oh, well, actually, Shannan Gilbert, in my opinion, doesn't appear to be one of the victims, but however, involved in this case in the way that she was a catalyst that moved the case on.
I'm a lawyer for Shannan Gilbert's family and also for Jessica Taylor's family. So I speak for them. And the feeling for all of us there is one of a sort of, a bittersweet taste in that the monster is taken off the street. The case appears, therefore, to be very substantially and partly solved. And we're very pleased for all of that. But on the other hand, there are 8 people for whom this man has not been charged yet for any murder. One of them he probably will be right away, and that's the 4th one, that was a girl that was wrapped in burlap. But the others, many of them who were dismembered, are kind of an open question. And so that's what makes it bittersweet. And then we hope that he'll be coming forward and admitting, once he finds that he's trapped, and admitting to the ones he killed.
Well, let's talk about that, because the reporting is the only thing he said after being arrested was apparently telling his lawyers tearfully, "I didn't do this."
Every perp didn't do it. Prisons are filled with innocent people, if you believe that. So, of course, Rex Human, serial killers, got tears in his eyes. He didn't do it. Yeah, exactly.
At this point, it doesn't appear that he's going to confess to anything. When you found out that he was being charged only with respect to 3 of the victims and not all of the with respect to all the bodies that were found in Gilgo Beach, you said it was bittersweet. Do you think, and look, they're now combing through his whole life. They're looking through all of his house, through everything. Are you confident that within, I don't know, the next 6 months, year, he's going to be charged with respect to more of killings?
Confident is probably not the right word. It's a reasonable proposition that he will be. And the open question is whether there's anyone else involved besides himself. And that question can be answered in that we think there's a substantial body of evidence. We have some of it, a good deal of it, which suggests that there's more than one person involved in these killings. And certainly when you take the dismembered bodies, none of the girls that he's charged with right now were dismembered, whereas many of the others were. So it suggests either another killer or killers, and or possibly someone who helped him dispose of the bodies by chopping them up.
Yeah.
So it's any one of those, and God knows what else. But it's very likely, it seems to me, that this guy is responsible for other murders as well that were that have not yet been discovered, or having been discovered have not yet been revealed.
And thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com.
So interesting. Did that? Of course, that tape there was before he claimed that that there was other people involved. That he claimed that Rex Human's wife knew all about it. So this was after the arrest. One of the things we spoke about last night with Jim Clemente and, of course, Bobby Chacon was organized and disorganized offenders. And that is such an interesting concept, because when we talk about some of the serial killers that we've watched, or what are the characteristics of an organized and as opposed to a disorganized offender. And with organized offenders, there are typically 3 separate crime scenes where the victim was approached by the killer, where the victim was killed, and where the victim's body was disposed of. Organized killers are very difficult to apprehend because they go to inordinate lengths to cover their tracks and often are forensically savvy, meaning they are familiar with police investigation methods. They are likely to follow the news media reports of their crimes and may even correspond with the news media. Ted Bundy, Joel Rifkin, and Dennis Rader are prime examples of organized killers. So then you might ask, what is a disorganized killer? Disorganized crimes, in contrast, are not planned, and the criminals typically leave evidence such as fingerprints or blood at the scene of the murder. There is often no attempt to move or otherwise conceal the corpse after the murder. Disorganized criminals may be young, under the influence of alcohol or drugs, or mentally ill. They often have deficient communication and social skills and may be below average in intelligence. The disorganized offender is likely to come from an unstable or dysfunctional family. Disorganized offenders often have been abused physically or sexually by relatives. They are often sexually inhibited, sexually uninformed, and may have sexual aversions or other pathologies. They are more likely than organized criminals to be compulsive masturbators. They are often isolated from others, live alone, and are frightened or confused during the commission of their murders. They often do not have reliable transportation, so they kill their victims closer to home than do organized offenders. You know, one of the interesting things that I sort of picked up on this and listening to Jim Clemente, of course, FBI agent, writer for Criminal Minds, can a organized offender have some of the very same traits of a disorganized offender? And I think the answer to that is yes, except when you think of predatory behavior, the disorganized offender, we used to, in the police department, called these people and even robbers on the street crimes of opportunity. That maybe this person didn't go out onto the street to commit a robbery, but saw the perfect victim. And we used to say that, and Lieutenant Pete can tell you that, in street crime and anti-crime. This was just a crime of opportunity. This victim walked by at the worst time that this predator was just out on the street, and just because he was there, decided to commit this crime. So I'm sort of drawing a parallel between disorganized offenders and crimes of opportunity. And for sure, that exists. Folks, I'm going to, Tuesday night, I'm going to have another tremendous guest. And although we know the bodies in the Lisk, Long Island serial killer case were dumped mostly, I say mostly, in Suffolk County. I believe at least 2 were dumped in Nassau County, and that would have been Peaches and the unidentified toddler. And Peaches hasn't been identified by name, however, just by the nickname Peaches. And also, where does Rex Heuermann live? He lives in Nassau County, Massapequa Park. So Nassau County is tremendously involved in this investigation. Has a huge stake in this investigation. And they worked this investigation. So I have been able, through my years of podcasting and my connections with this person on previous shows, to get Nassau County Police Commissioner Patrick Ryder. And I'm going to have him on the show Tuesday night at 9:00. And he's a tremendous guy, an outstanding police commissioner, and of course, former NYPD. Doesn't that make sense? Former NYPD. So he's going to be on the show on Tuesday night at 9 p.m. And we're going to talk about the involvement of Nassau County. How did this involve Nassau County? How much were they involved? And I don't know, but you know something? Barbara Stevenson, why did the other cops in Suffolk department not turn in Burke? You know, I'm not sure. Maybe they did. I don't know. I don't know exactly how Burke was caught. I do know how Burke was caught. Burke was caught because he beat up a perp who broke into his car that allegedly stole some things out of Burke's car that he did not want public. So whether he had been committing crimes or irregularities or whatever prior to that, and the other Suffolk County police didn't turn him in, I don't know. But Burke was arrested for beating up a perp who was under arrest, who had broken into his car. And that's what Burke eventually was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison for, and did 4 years. Somehow got his pension. So I don't know the answers of what he was like prior to that, but that's the answer to that question. Folks, that's about all I have for you today, but thank you so much for tuning in. This case will continue to fascinate. It'll continue to get the public's attention. It'll continue to bring in experts from all over the world analyzing this case. Why not? Why did this happen? Why didn't that happen? And the connections to this case. And I will continue to cover it. It's fascinating. And as I said, this Tuesday night, Nassau County Police Commissioner Patrick Ryder at 9 p.m. Until then, have a great day. God bless, and I'll see you soon.
One episode just ain't enough.